Welcome to Tea, Tales, and Talks, where we talk about spooky things, drink some tea, and try not to get too scared. I'm Sarah, I'll be your host.
And I'm Mackenzie, I'll be your co-host.
For these strange and occasionally unsettling tales.
If you like spooky stuff, history, ghosts, ghouls, witches, and mysteries of this world and others, then Tea, Tales, and Talks might be the podcast for you. Join us for all the paranormal tea, haunted tales, and spooky talks. New episodes drop every Monday wherever you get your podcasts.
Until we meet again, our twitchy witchy friends, stay spooky and
don't let your tea get cold.
Canadian Creepies is recorded on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, under the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. These lands and waters have been cared for since long before Canada existed, and they remain deeply important to Indigenous communities today. As we tell stories about darkness, injustice, and memory, I want to acknowledge the very real histories of colonization, violence, and erasure that Indigenous peoples continue to endure. A land acknowledgement can't undo that harm, but it is a reminder to keep listening, learning, and supporting in truth and reconciliation in meaningful ways. We share these stories not to forget, but to shine light, always with respect for peoples and nations whose land we live on. Canadian Creepies covers true crime, dark history, and disturbing events. Some episodes may include graphic descriptions or sensitive subject matter. We do our best to handle every story with care and respect for those affected. That said, we sometimes use humor and sarcasm as a way to process heavy content, never to disrespect victims, survivors, or their families. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Canadian Creepies. I am absolutely honored to be here with author Ann McDougall. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
This is really exciting.
we're going to get into it. But before we do, for those of you who do not know who Ann is, I'm going to read her bio. Ann is an actor, writer, and graphic designer / illustrator living in Toronto. She is the author of A Ghost in the Room, Supernatural Adventures in Historic Houses. The book began as an essay, The Haunted, which was longlisted for the 2022 CBC Nonfiction Prize. And you can learn more about A Ghost in the Room through Ann McDougall's website. And we're going to talk about it right now as well. As a storyteller, Ann has been featured at the Toronto Storytelling Festival, Speak, 1001 Friday Nights of Storytelling, The Spit, and numerous other festivals. Ann has had an eclectic career working as an actor in children's theater. Oh my God, that's so fun.
It was.
A historian and guide in historic houses, museums, and a graphic designer and illustrator for the green energy industry. So cool. This is great. I'm so excited you're here. Most recently, she has returned to acting and has appeared on screen as a voice actor in a range of commercials, short films, and podcasts. Well, this is great because one day maybe you'll be on you can voice act for one of my podcasts.
Amazing. I'd love to.
So Ann wrote A Ghost in a Room, and before I get into the questions, or like the interview, from the first line, I was absolutely hooked, and several times I was laughing with you.
Amazing.
It was just so nice. Fun. I was picking up on your humor. I was like, this is great. I love it. And the Canadiana of it all is it's wonderful. And I think for any listeners who are, Southern Ontario, it's really fun to, representation matters. And it's really fun to hear all of the local landmarks that we have grown up visiting.
Yeah.
So it's great. In the opening of the book, you strike a really careful balance between curiosity and skepticism. Was that tone something you consciously crafted from the beginning, or did it emerge as you were writing?
I would say I tried to bring it through the writing process, because one thing about A Ghost in the Room is there's a lot of research to it. I went out and I did a lot of things as well as doing, historical research. And, for me, I am more of a skeptic in my approach. But I am really bothered when people write about the supernatural from a skeptical point of view that's dismissive, because I think if you're dismissive, that's really misses the most interesting part of the conversation, which is, why are people so interested in the paranormal? Why does this matter to us? Why do we keep coming back to this? And so I really wanted, as someone who is skeptical, I really wanted to come in with an openness to really hear what people were experiencing, experience what I could myself, see if my point of view would change over time. And so I'm glad that comes through in the writing, because I tried to bring it not just to the writing, but also to the people I met in the research process, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. Oh my goodness. Does that sound okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I unmuted it and scared myself. That totally makes sense, and it really comes through. And I love the balance between the skepticism and the mystery of it all. It's you do a great job with that. You also touch on how often spirit messages seem to center around reassurance, people being told that they did everything for others or that they were deeply loved. From your research, do you see that as a pattern across cases?
It is definitely a pattern that I noticed, especially in my sort of in-person research, was that when people were, whether they were getting a message at in a spiritualist church where it's part of the church service, or at a seance, if people were going in this sort of mindset of wanting to connect with the other side, not in a fearful ghosts are scary way, but in a sort of very loving, I want to connect with the other side way, then the messages they tended to get were reassuring and they were positive. And, you could argue that speaks to maybe the fact that they might be coming from within us and where our subconscious minds are giving us the reassurance that we need. Or, of course, you could also argue that maybe it's because our loved ones who have passed love us and want us to feel good and be happy. But either way, I found it really interesting because, the perception is that if you try to talk to the other side, it's going to be a terrifying experience and bad things will happen and it will be frightening. And that was just not what I experienced at all. Like time and time again, when people were interested in the paranormal, what they were actually interested in was this sort of very loving and very kind human connection. And I found that across the board with spiritualists and people who take this in a more religious vein, but also with paranormal investigators. Like I met a lot of lovely paranormal investigators. And at one point, one of them said, the important thing is that we understand that if these entities are human, then they're human and we should treat them like people. And I thought that was lovely and respectful and honestly kind of got to the heart of why people do this, is because it is ultimately about a kind of human connection.
Totally. It's about, it's 100% about the connection. And in the book, I'm going to keep saying this the whole interview, you do a great job of illustrating that. And it shines through in your words and how you're describing your experiences, especially in those, like the spiritualist spaces. It's like, wow, do I want to try that? I'm not sure.
But honestly, it's a lovely space. And I will say, so, spiritualism, I went in with this perception because I come from a museum background and I love history. Yep. And I went in with this perception that spiritualism was this thing in the past. And I mean, it was a big thing in the past. It comes up in the 1850s and it becomes this huge movement right through the 1920s and then kind of tapers off. But in my mind, I thought, oh, it's a thing. It was an oddity of the Victorian era and now it's done. And that's absolutely not true. Spiritualist churches are all over the world. There are hundreds of them worldwide. There's a large number in Canada. It's a very active community. And my experience was that they are so welcoming and so lovely and so just tuned into bringing these beliefs to people in a very healing and wholesome and community supported way. So honestly, if that's the experience you're looking for, I do recommend it. They're lovely.
And one thing I noticed, I do have a question about it later, but one thing I did notice every time you entered a spiritualist space, it seemed the Reverend was always a woman.
Yeah. And
I wondered if that maybe had something to do with the welcoming atmosphere. Not to toot women's horns, but actually I'm always doing that on this podcast. So
no, it's an interesting religion because it has always been centered around women. So from the very earliest days of spiritualism, which were focused around the Fox sisters, which for those who don't know were these teenage girls who lived near Rochester, New York, and who really early in their teens, we're talking about younger than 14, claimed that they were talking to spirits who would sort of tap and make rapping noises to communicate. And over time, this developed into seances, but also this now sort of organized religion. And so from its very inception, the religion was focused on and centered around women. And although there have always been men within spiritualism, what happened is that a lot of women became sort of leaders in the church and in their own circles. A lot of early seances happened in the home. A lot of the really successful early mediums were women. And this is all happening at a time in history when women don't have a lot of public spaces where they can speak, let alone lead in society. And then all of a sudden you have this religious space where women start to receive messages from spirits and also to give messages, often, paraphrasing a spirit and speaking with great authority on topics ranging from science to medicine to politics. And it really changes the role of women in society. And what I think is interesting about spiritualism is, other than the Fox sisters themselves, although there have been many prominent spiritualists, there's never been a central cult-like figure. It is truly these spaces, often that are mostly female, that are really community-centered. And it's really quite beautiful.
Yeah, and again, you do a great job of making sure that shines through in the book. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Do you, just going back to the messages of reassurance, do you think that those kinds of messages tell us more? Well, I guess we actually, we can talk about it. Do you think those kinds of messages tell more about the phenomenon itself or about universal human emotions and what people hope to hear from loved ones who have passed?
I think they definitely tell us a lot about what we hope to hear, like whether
Yes.
or not these messages are truly coming from our loved ones. I think they say a lot about the reassurance that we're looking for. I also think like one thing I did in my research process that I found so interesting was I went to an automatic writing workshop, which is where
Yes.
you yourself are the one giving yourself the message. It comes through
Yes.
you. And if you are a believer in that technique, then you believe that a spirit or some kind of being is kind of temporarily taking over your body to give you that message. But either way, across the board, the messages that came through, like for me personally, but also for other people in the group, were super positive and super sort of reassuring and like, you can do it messages. And I thought that's so interesting. Like if it is coming from within us, then that really speaks to something that we subconsciously want to tell ourselves in this very like loving way. And if it comes from outside of us, then that's really nice too, honestly.
Either way, it seems like a win-win with
Yeah.
the automatic writing. I mean, and that's funny because like the first time I ever heard of automatic writing was in The Sixth Sense. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
The movie
yeah,
The
definitely.
Sixth Sense. So
Yeah.
it's like, to me, I'm like, well, that's all I know about it. It's like this violent whatever. And then to have that contrasted with what you experienced with it, it's very interesting. There's also sort of this underlying theme of like early on in the book, there's this like underlying theme of trickery, both in terms of historical frauds and the possibility of misinterpretation. How important was it for you to include that tension between sincerity and deception right from the start?
I found it really important because actually the thing that sort of got me interested in this topic was, I had written a little bit about ghosts and about working in a museum and how people come in and ask about ghosts. But one thing I was always fascinated by were seances, because if you read about seances in the 19th century through the early 20th century, right into the 30s and 40s, the actual descriptions of what happened in seances are wild, like absolutely wild. Like we're talking levitating furniture. We're talking musical instruments flying through the air and
What
playing
a time
music.
to be alive, eh?
Like, absolutely wild. Like we're talking about random objects appearing like cactuses and live fish and like falling down on the seance table. Like fascinating, like, wild stuff was happening. And I really, like, as a skeptical person, it got me thinking, like, okay, but what was happening? Like, how is this being done? If we're accepting that it might not be ghosts, then what on earth was happening? And I found...
was there even fishing line then?
Yeah, what really? Like how? And so I found this fascinating book from the very early 20th century. I think it's 1903. And it was written by a magician. And he was one of the many really cool magicians who investigated these seances and then wrote an entire book about these are all the tricks that these fraudsters are using, and this is how they function, and this is how they work. And there's actually a lot of books like this from the period. And I found it so interesting. And maybe because I am an actor and like a theater person, it's very theatrical, right? To set up a darkened room where all these absolutely wild effects are taking place. So I knew going into the history that trickery was a big part of it. I also knew it wasn't the only part of it, because there were always and are still today people who are incredibly sincere in their beliefs and their experiences. And so I thought it was really important to talk about both, because if you go in, just from the position of belief, and this is beautiful and this is fascinating, that's great. But it leaves out an entire element, which is that you have an ecosystem both of believers and of people who are very willing to prey on that belief and also reinforce it with things that we know are just simply not real. And I thought that was important. And then I think it's also important, just as much as I wanted to be open-minded and not be dismissively skeptical, I also think it's really important for anyone who's inclined to believe in the supernatural to also be open to the fact that there are other explanations that are rooted in science. And as someone who loves science, I think that's just as interesting. Like whatever is happening here with the paranormal, it's very interesting, whatever the answer is.
Yes, it is very interesting. And you also hint at how unreliable perception can be.
Yeah.
In your experience, how much does that factor into what people interpret as supernatural encounters?
I think it's huge. I really do. There are a lot of paranormal experiences that people have that are very, very ambiguous. So if you're in a space, for example, like a creaky old house where these often happen, and if you ask a question to ghosts, what will often happen is you'll hear a thump or a creak or a sound. And the timing of that sound feels very meaningful. It feels like an answer to a question.
Yes.
But the truth is, old houses creak and thump like crazy. That is just what they do.
That's
and
right.
There are also times when you will not ask a question, you'll hear creaks and thumps. And it really comes down to a matter of interpretation in those moments. And if you are both believing and looking for meaning in that thump, it's very easy to take it as an answer. Our brains do that so easily. And if you're not inclined to belief, then it's very easy to take it as random noise. And so I would often be in situations where something seemed kind of random to me, but people around me would absolutely take it as real. And then you're in this funny space where things are unprovable, right? Because it really seems real and it really feels real. And of course, the people who are diligent in the paranormal world try to step beyond just confirmation of what they want and to get really scientific with their methods and to get really detailed about collecting evidence. And that's an approach I really respect, if that makes sense, because our perception is so flawed and so skewed by our own desires and what we want to believe that anybody who's really trying to get beyond that and tackle things with real scientific rigor, it's very difficult to do. And so I have a ton of respect for anyone who really tries to take it to these difficult questions about what we're experiencing.
Yeah, for sure. And one moment that really stood out to me was when James Curry brought up your dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to admit, I was completely on his side. I was like, this is it. And then, so what was going through your mind at that exchange?
Yeah, so this is a moment in the book where I went to see a medium who was doing a demonstration of mediumship in a spiritualist church, which is when you get messages. You know, if you've ever seen someone do platform mediumship on TV and give messages to an audience, it's that kind of thing. And I had set up beforehand as a test, I had posted a fake picture of a dog that never existed on social media, on Twitter, saying, oh, this is my dog who died, RIP. And I had put it the day before as like a test for what's called hot reading. So hot reading is when a fake medium looks you up beforehand and gets information about you and then pretends that spirits gave it to them. So I put it up as a test for hot reading, but I really didn't expect it to work because I had thrown it up the day before and it was pretty obvious, honestly. And I really, really didn't think anything would come of it. But I thought, okay, I'll just put this up on X, on Twitter, and it'll sit there. And if I go see mediums, maybe someone will try to hot read me. And then what happened was I went to this demonstration of mediumship, and he was so convincing. He was so lovely. He was like Santa Claus, like just this adorable gentleman. And a lot of, I think in retrospect, what was happening was what's called cold reading, which is when you get information about a person just by kind of making guesses based on their age and their demeanor. And, you know, some people are just very talented at guessing and picking things up. And then he would get these amazing hits where he would tell someone the date of an event that they were going to, or he would tell them a special dessert that their grandmother used to make for them. And I found myself sitting there going, oh my God, maybe this guy's the real deal. Like, this is amazing. I can't believe this. And then he got to me, and it was clearly his big finish because it was right before he was about to end. And he started talking about the dog and my beloved pet dog and describing to a T the photo that I had posted. And again, not only was this not my dog, I have never had a dog. Like, there was no way.
No history with
There
dog
was no way that you could ever claim that this was something he was getting from the spirit world. And it was truly shocking. Like, I was shocked.
You're like, as if.
I was shocked that my plan had worked, because what a ridiculous plan, but also shocked that he would do it, especially because, you know, this was a place where people had come to mourn their loved ones. This was a place where people were crying through the whole thing. This was so meaningful to the people who experienced it. And he had clearly looked people up on social media beforehand. And that kind of behavior is unfortunately very common.
Yeah.
And it really drove home for me how this really is an ecosystem of both believers and people who prey on believers. And it was important to me to include that in the book, because if anyone, you know, if you are inclined to belief, then you need to be careful because there are really
Yes.
people out there who will take advantage. Historically, we know that's true. Like there's all kinds of fascinating accounts of that happening historically, but it is absolutely still happening today. And, sometimes people will argue, well, if it makes people feel better, but in their grief, maybe it's okay. I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's okay to manipulate people, not when it's
still swindling
that's
someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That detail, your sweet, loyal, non-existent dog, was both funny and a little unsettling. Do you think moments like that reveal something important about how quickly belief can take hold?
Yeah, absolutely. Because up until the moment that he did the dog, I was really with him. And I was really,
me too.
I
was like, this is
in
it.
that room, and everybody was crying, and everybody believed.
My heart.
And it felt so beautiful. And I was taken into that moment. And I think also, if I had been more vulnerable, like again, I never had a dog, so I didn't have a dog to mourn. But if I had been more vulnerable, if I had been there, in the fresh grief of losing a loved one, and then heard a beautiful message from this sweet man in a lovely place, I think I probably would have done anything to keep believing. Like it felt, even knowing the dog wasn't real, it felt incredible to get this message.
And I'm so comforted.
Yes. And not only that, not only are you so comforted in that moment, but there's all this positive attention on you. Like it's not only this person looking at you intently and speaking directly to you, but you're in a room with 100 other people who are looking at you and smiling at you and passing you tissues and just want nothing but happiness for you.
Yeah. That sounds overwhelming.
It's overwhelmingly positive.
To be perceived that much. Yeah. At the same time.
And to see people see your pain, to see your pain and to celebrate you through it. These are things we all need, which means we need to be really careful because there are people like James Curry who will absolutely take advantage. And that is really unfortunate.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Because the way you describe it is so beautiful. Who wouldn't want to be amongst that? But to know it's rooted in some trickery is just icky.
You. Still haunting the same old fast fashion? Time to dig up something better with Back from the Dead Goods, a Canadian small business where forgotten threads get a second life and sustainability meets spooky. This isn't just upcycled clothing. It's resurrected fashion with an eerie edge. Handpicked, reworked, and revived, every piece is as unique as a ghost story whispered at midnight. And because you're a part of the Canadian Creepies family, you get an exclusive deal. Use code Canadian Creepies at checkout for 10% off. Find them lurking on Instagram, Etsy, and Poshmark. Links are in the episode description. Give your wardrobe a second chance at life, if you dare. Hey creeps, it's Valerie here, and if you're anything like us, you love capturing a moment, whether it's spooky, sweet, or somewhere delightfully in between. Let me introduce you to our go-to for stunning shots, darkroom photography, based right here in the heart of the Niagara region. Mel, the brilliant eye behind the lens, is a lifestyle and creative photographer who brings a little bit of magic and maybe a touch of mystery to every session. She's got all her prices listed right on her website, super transparent, no tricks, and she runs killer seasonal specials around Mother's Day, Halloween, Christmas, and more. I'm telling you, her Halloween sessions, creepy perfection. So, if you're in the Niagara area and looking to capture memories that are hauntingly beautiful, hit up Mel at mel@darkroomphotography.ca or check out her work at www.darkroomphotography.ca. That's Darkroom Photography, where your memories come to life, even in the dark. Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you. Support reproductive justice in Niagara. Niagara Reproductive Justice is a grassroots collective based in the Niagara region of Ontario, working to increase visibility and access to sexual and reproductive health care. They support people seeking abortion and other essential care by offering transportation, financial assistance, logistical help, and emotional support. Here's how you can help. You can make a one-time donation. Send an e-transfer to niagarareproductivejustice@gmail.com. Your support helps cover costs like gas for volunteer drivers, overnight stays, childcare, and other urgent needs. You can also support monthly via Patreon. Join their Patreon and support the cause month to month. It's patreon.com/Niagara Reproductive Justice. And you can volunteer your time. NRJ is always looking for volunteers to help with driving, outreach, admin support, and community organizing. If you're looking to make a real impact in the Niagara region, this is a great place to start. Contact them via email or DM them on Instagram or Facebook to learn more. You can find them on Instagram at Niagara Reproductive Justice and on Facebook at Niagara Reproductive Justice. Help amplify access to reproductive care right here in our own backyard. Whether you donate, volunteer, or spread the word, you're a part of the movement.
Yeah, and and to be clear, if someone's not using trickery, if someone is just sincerely giving messages, like many of these mediums were, then I think that's beautiful. Whether or not they're coming from the dead, I think that is a beautiful practice. So it's just
absolutely
the key is whether or not the giver is sincere in their belief. That's the key.
Yes. I really loved how you made a point to clarify that none of the women at one of the workshops you attended, I think after the James Curry spiritualist moment. None of the women at the workshop came across, actually, I think I don't know what I was doing with that question.
I think I know what you're alluding to, actually.
There was something flirty or silly about it.
Yeah.
And it felt very intentional. Was that something conscious? Like you were conscious of pushing back against as you were writing?
Yeah, I really was. So the moment you're describing, I went to a mediumship development workshop at a different spiritualist church on a different day, and the idea
I'm glad you're picking up what I'm putting down.
Yeah, they were gonna teach us and to the process for if you want to give people messages from the dead, as if you want to be a medium, this is how you do it. And it was a fascinating experience, but it was really interesting because a lot of the people at that workshop, it was all women. A lot of them were members of this spiritualist church, and this is something that really is clearly very meaningful to them. And then a few of them are also like professional psychics or professionals in this sort of like supernatural realm who are doing it as professional development, which I thought was also very fascinating.
Yes.
And the reason what I really wanted to establish when I was writing this, often when I would describe to people the research I was doing, and folks who really, really believe in ghosts and really, really believe in spirit communication, that the response I would get from people who are skeptical was they would say, oh, these people are loony. This is ridiculous.
Yes.
And I really wanted to push back against that because it was just, not only is that a bit rude, but also it just wasn't my experience. Like the people I met who were firm believers in spirit communication, the paranormal investigators that I met, every single one of them was intelligent, focused, thoughtful. Like these people were not silly. These people were not loony. These people were not flighty or bizarre. There are bizarre people everywhere, but that just wasn't it. And it really, it changed my perception, to be honest. Like I didn't go in expecting everybody to be wacky, but I just didn't realize that I would consistently meet these highly intelligent people who just have these experiences. They have these supernatural experiences, whether they see a ghost, whether they feel their presence, whether they receive messages. This is happening, at least in their minds, if not in the world. Yes. But all of them are smart and all of them are just trying to figure out what is happening and what it means. And I have tremendous respect for that. I don't know what it means. I don't know what is happening. None of us truly do. And so I think it's a completely legitimate point of view is what I've really come to. And I really wanted to make that clear. A lot of the situations I was in were kind of funny, but the people themselves were smart, focused, thoughtful, through and through.
And you did a great job describing them that way as well.
I'm glad.
Pat yourself on the back for that. You also introduce terms that people might not expect in this space, like language that, oh, no, that's a wrong question.
Okay.
How did you decide when to pause? Gonna skip that part. I'm sorry.
No worries.
One thing that really surprised me was how empowering spiritualism can be, especially historically. Mm-hmm. Was that something that stood out to you as your research as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but spiritualism really gave a voice to women in a time period where their role in society was changing, but not fast enough. Like, this is long before women have the right to vote. This is when women are still very much sort of stuck in a domestic sphere in a lot of ways. And it's also really, spiritualism emerges in the 1850s, which is a really interesting juncture in history because it's when modern technology is really starting to take root. So this is when we first see radio and mass communication coming through. And then a little while later, you start to see the telephone. And I think these things are actually very closely intertwined. Like, this is a time when society is changing because suddenly people can communicate, people can travel, railroads are coming in. The world is changing to look a lot more like our world. And all of a sudden, religion, which is a huge part of everyone's life in this time period, doesn't really fit society and particularly doesn't fit the role of women anymore. And so you see women find this religion where all of a sudden they are empowered. They can speak with an authority that is given to them by spirits, and they become not only leaders, but they become these really public figures. Like, especially early on, there was a big trend for something called trance speaking. And trance speaking is when typically a woman, there were male trance speakers, but most often a woman would go into a trance and then speak in the voice of a spirit and deliver these long lectures. Like, we're talking about an hour at a time on all of these very sophisticated topics. And what's a little hard to understand today is that this was a huge, I want to say entertainment, but it's not the right word. This was a huge public thing. Like, you could go to these trance speakers and you could go see them in public, and they would draw enormous audiences, like hundreds of people. And at any time in any major city in, like, really the 1860s right up to the end of the 19th century, public seances were happening all the time. They were sort of like an entertainment. You could see them listed in newspapers and magazines. You could go to public seances. You could see people do this kind of trance speaking and then other demonstrations as well, sort of the wilder stuff. But it was a very public sort of media thing, and it was something that women just suddenly had access to. So it was very empowering. It's really quite interesting how it affected and changed the role of women in society.
It's very interesting. I loved reading about it. I'm very passionate about feminism. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know.
Yes.
I also noticed that many of, we already talked about that. It was the question about the women reverends.
Yeah.
Yes. There is a moment where the difference between, look at me. We're jumping ahead of questions here. That's about cold and hot readings, and you already went through that. You introduced the idea of reading psychically versus mediumistically. How did those differ in practice, and why was it important to make that distinction clear?
Yeah, so I wrote about it out of the book because at that same workshop that I went on, that mediumship development workshop, we were instructed to work differently between working psychically and working mediumistically. And I won't pretend to be an expert in this, but based on what we were taught at the time, is that working psychically was getting information from the person you were reading. So sort of getting it directly from, I think it was explained to us as their aura, but sort of this like brain to brain idea. Whereas working mediumistically was getting information from a dead person who was sort of a relative and loved one of that person who would come and give you messages for them. And so, you know, for me, on the skeptical side of things, it really seemed like both of those things were really just coming from the reader and from that person's ability to either guess information about that person or get a feel from the conversation. However, on the side of belief, there's a feeling that these two things are very different. One is coming from the person being read, and one is coming from an outside entity who is outside of life and who has passed away. And so it becomes this very interesting distinction. It also, I will say, when we talk about fraud, that distinction between being psychic and being mediumistic also functions as sort of a get out of jail free card for fraud mediums, because if you point out that someone got information beforehand, like if I had stood up and said, hey, I've never had a dog, you're a fraud, I can tell you that the explanation that often happens for that kind of thing is people will say, oh, you were thinking about it, so they got it psychically. So it's often, because psychic information is such a loose term, you can apply it to almost anything, and you can use it to justify almost anything. So it is a really interesting distinction, especially, for those who believe. But I will say it is a bit of a slippery term, because it allows you to explain almost any phenomena.
Anything.
Yeah, exactly. As being either psychic or mediumistic. So I'm wary. And one thing I've really found again and again is that when you debunk something, like even if you have very clear evidence that something is fraud, people who really, really want to believe will find a reason to believe anyway.
They will.
It's incredibly hard to debunk anything supernaturally because people believe so passionately.
Yeah. I mean, that can be used as an example in recent day politics as well.
Yes.
People want to believe something hard enough, they will.
Yeah.
I have to say your balance between skepticism and openness really resonates with me.
Thanks.
It feels very similar to how my brain operates, especially when I'm approaching these kind of topics. Did that balance come naturally to you, which it seems like it does, or was it something that you had to actively hold on to while you were experiencing all of this?
I went in really, really wanting to stay open, and I think being a little bit more inclined to be on the dismissive end of things. I went in not really thinking that things would be really convincing to me. And what I found as my research progressed was, although, there was never a moment where I was like, oh, wow, I saw a ghost. This is all real. This is incredible. I'm a believer. I never had that moment. But I did have these experiences again and again where I felt like, oh, that was really ambiguous. And I can see 100% why someone would believe that was supernatural. And so over the course of my research, I would say that balance really became more of a 50-50 balance. I really landed in that space of, I really don't know exactly what's going on, and I'm fascinated by it, and I'm full of respect for the people who both believe and don't believe. And so I landed with fewer answers in a lot of ways, but that's kind of, that openness just sort of developed organically, I'd say.
There's this moment where you describe Kelly's great aunt Jean. Do you recall that? Yes. Yeah. And it really stuck with me. What was it about that experience that felt significant to you?
Yeah, so this was when I was attending, it's as an open mediumship development circle. So a lot of spiritualist churches have these, and it's a place, it's like a more informal place where you can go and practice mediumship and where people will give each other messages. And so I went to this circle, and I did not expect it to be as fun as it was. It was so fun, actually. It was just the loveliest group of people. And they were tossing around this red bean bag and giving each other messages from...
Pass it here.
Yeah, from their loved ones. And it was just full of laughter and love. And it was just delightful. One of the things I note in the book is that that experience to me felt a lot like improv. As an actor,
yes.
Done a lot of theatrical improv. It felt a lot like improvising. It really had the same vibe. And one of the things that happened there, I had really gone just intending to observe, but we were encouraged again and again as newcomers, just try it, just give someone a message, because the belief within that circle was that we had invited spirits into the space. And so if images or messages came into our minds, we could be confident that they were from a spirit who wanted to give someone a message. And so I found, as the night progressed, I found that I really sort of did have an image in my mind and a thought of who I wanted to give it to. And so I decided to try it in that moment. And I felt kind of torn because, I wouldn't describe myself as a believer, and I definitely don't want to falsely give someone a message. I don't want to be a fraud, if that makes sense.
Totally.
But within the construct that we were in, the Reverend made it very clear, like, if you have an image, we believe that's a message and we want to hear it. So I did it. So I spoke to one of the women there, and I told her what was in my head, this very specific image, this very specific message. And she got quite emotional, and I had this moment where I felt like, oh no, like this is terrible.
Yeah.
What have I done? Like, am I impersonating this woman's dead relative? This is awful. But then she said very confidently, she said, I think it was her grandmother's sister. I think this was my very specific relative. I know that message was from her, and thank you.
Wow.
And it was a really interesting moment, because to me, that process felt exactly like improvising, even though I was sincerely trying to do it. Like, I was sincerely trying to participate and do exactly what we were doing. It didn't feel any different from an improv class. It felt like the same thing. Like, it felt like that sort of free flow from the mind.
Yeah.
But that does not mean they were wrong about what was happening. And it may be that those two things just feel the same. So did I do mediumship? I don't know. But to her, she was very confident that, yes, that was what happened, and was happy to get that message. And so I was glad of that. It left me in a strange place. Like, one thing that's happened to me now. Pardon?
You're like, am I a medium now?
Yeah, it left me in this weird place where I was like, did I do it? I don't know. Yeah. One thing that's happened subsequently since the book came out is that I've had a few people come to me and say, hey, you took mediumship classes. You know how to do mediumship. I know you don't believe in this, but will you do it anyway? Like, will you do me? Will you give me a reading? And my answer is always no, because I could, but because I don't sincerely believe that's what I'm doing, it doesn't feel right. Like, I really don't want to impersonate anyone's dead relative, if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, but the message I've had from people is, you may not believe, but I do. So I think that anything you say is going to be real. And it's it's an interesting place to land.
Yes.
Yeah. So am I a practicing medium now? Absolutely not. But it was this very ambiguous place. I still don't really know what happened, but I do know that the woman who received that message, it was meaningful to her. And so I'm glad of that.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? Like, as long as, there's a phrase, people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful example of that. I was recently in an improv class, and I couldn't help but laugh at the comparison between the spiritualist church and improv. There's something about being fully present, reading the room, and responding in the moment that does, seem really similar.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an element of performance, or at least responsiveness, in those spaces that people don't always recognize?
I do. And the reason I really think that is more about my experience of being read. Like, so my experience of someone giving me a message. Like, what happened a couple of times actually at that same workshop is someone would give me a message and the message was wrong. So a couple of times I had a medium who would give me a message and it was all about like a spirit with a brother energy. And they were like clearly getting at the idea that I had a brother who died and who was trying to contact me.
Sorry.
No worries. I love it.
I can hear you. It's okay. Can you still hear the talking?
Yeah. I can hear you. You're
sorry.
okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just 1 sec.
No worries.
I will move her. Daisy girl. Sorry about that.
No,
I
listen,
muted
when people's
it.
animals pop up on a Zoom, it's my absolute favorite. So
we have 3, so.
Yeah, sorry. I'm actually having trouble hearing your mic now for some reason.
Oh. How's that?
No, I can't hear you at all.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's promising.
How's that?
Better. It's still low, but I can hear you now.
How's that?
Still really, really soft.
Weird. What happened, I wonder?
Oh, hang on. That was a little bit better.
It's an Amazon mic.
There you go. Perfect. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. So at that same mediumship development circle, I was getting read, and they were getting at the idea that it was my brother who was there and was giving me these messages. And because, I was there to observe, so one thing that happens when you're being read is people tell you, you're told very clearly, don't give explanations when someone gives you a message. You either say yes, or you say no, or you say, I don't know. And the idea is you're not giving information to the medium. They're getting it all from the spirits. However, what actually happens when you can't say yes, or you can only say yes, no, or I don't know, is there's no room for clarity and for nuance. So if something is even a little bit right, you say yes. And there's also kind of a lot of social pressure, weirdly, does not say no. It's really interesting. So I was getting these messages about a dead brother. And to be clear, I do not have a dead brother. I've never had a brother. This was wrong.
Yeah.
But what happened was I was getting this message about this, it was just this lovely message about this childlike spirit. It was running around and drawing pictures. And I started to get really emotional. And then I felt bad because I wasn't trying to trick anybody. I wasn't pretending. It's just the story was really sad. The idea of a dead brother was sad. And I started getting emotional. I was like, oh no, what am I doing? But I also couldn't really, there was no room to really be actually, no. It's not how it works. So it's this funny thing where I wasn't deliberately trying to be performative, but the way it is set up and the attention that is on you is so intense that it is really hard not to go along with it. And even when, in my case, where I really wasn't trying to trick anybody, I wound up, everybody left that room thinking I had a dead brother. And that is the sort of performative nature of it. And I think that is probably also true if you're a believer, although you might not be conscious of it, is that when you're in this environment and you want something to be true and everybody is paying attention and everybody is saying, yes, this is right, it is very natural to go along with it. And I think that probably applies not just to medium readings. I think that may also happen in more paranormal spaces where everybody goes, did you hear that? Oh yeah, I heard that. Oh yes, that was definitely a voice. I think a sort of social pressure to perform can shape a lot of it. And then once it happens, it starts to feel real, and you start to tell yourself the narrative that was real and that was what really happened, even if in the moment you might just have been fulfilling expectations.
That makes so much sense. You also describe how overwhelming it can feel to receive that level of warmth, kindness, and undivided attention all at once.
Yes.
And I think we just talked about it a little bit, but why do you think that kind of environment can make people more open or more affected by the experience?
Yeah, because it is really intense. It's a lot it is a lot of focused attention. And there are so many, there are so many times in our lives when we don't really get the full attention of other people. And so it feels really good. Even if there's not an audience, even if it's just the medium, I suspect it feels incredibly good to have someone look deeply at you and talk about you and to see your pain. We all carry grief, right? And ultimately, I think a lot of our interest in ghosts is about grief and about our curiosity about what happens to the people we love. And so to have someone witness your pain and talk about it in this really deep, affirming way it's an overwhelming feeling. And then to have that magnified by an audience of people who all feel the same way that you do, who all want this to be true, it is incredibly intense. Even with James Curry, who I knew was lying about my dead dog, I was sitting there with all this attention on me, and I'm sitting there going, but maybe he got it some other way. Maybe this is real. In my head,
maybe I did have a dog.
Yeah, honestly, for a moment, I was like, oh my God. It's wild how much your brain wants that affirmation, wants that experience, and also wants to keep that connection. You don't want to say to the person who is giving you a message, no, that's wrong. You don't want to break that experience, because for a moment you have a community around you that holds your pain and your grief. And that is something we all need, truly. And so of course you don't want to break it. Of course you don't want to let it go.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And Do you hope readers come away from these chapters with a more nuanced understanding of the people involved in these spaces, especially moving away from stereotypes?
100%. Because, you know, as I say, I was truly struck and impressed by the intelligence and thoughtfulness of people I met across the board, whether they were spiritualists, whether they were paranormal investigators. It's really people sincerely trying to figure out our world and to figure out their experience in it. And I don't think that should be dismissed. And one thing I found again and again in my historical research was that our interest in the paranormal has led to very real, very concrete advances in science. Like, this has happened again and again. We know about the ideomotor effect because of research on seances. We know about brain waves because of researchers trying to prove that telepathy exists. And this is the reason that we have a lot of medical devices that can read our brains because of this research. This is incredibly important, and because fundamentally, these are people trying to figure out how the world works and how our own brain, like what it means that we have these experiences. And so I think to be dismissive is to miss, from a scientific perspective, an incredibly interesting part of the conversation. Like, whether ghosts are happening in the world or whether they are happening in our minds, they say something interesting. And I think to dismiss that is honestly really lazy because there's a lot to be discovered about the world we live in.
Absolutely. And it's like, we're all, it garners the bigger question, like what happens when we pass and what goes on the other side. I think that's a huge question that we're all like, what is happening there? So we absolutely should not dismiss those. No, just trying to work that out.
We're trying to work it out. And I think, I believe in being rigorous. I believe in being scientific. And I think that does not always happen in people's enthusiasm to discover these things. But should we be asking these questions? Should we be engaging with the supernatural and our questions about it? Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely. And for someone reading about things like cold readings, hot readings, and different types of communication for the first time, what do you hope they will take away? What do you hope they take with them in terms of critical thinking?
Yeah. So I hope, if you're someone who is really inclined to believe in the supernatural, I hope that people will take away not disappointment. Like, I hope they don't read this and go, that ruins it for me. I really hope you don't, because I think that all of that stuff, all of the fraud side of it, says so many interesting things about our perception and how our brains work. And I think if you are truly someone who's interested in understanding this and understanding your own experience, all of that information is only helpful. And yes, I would say approach the world with a degree of caution, because there are unfortunately fraudsters out there, but also approach it with a degree of curiosity. Like, real hard science is just as interesting as the supernatural, in my personal opinion. And I hope people will go away with an appreciation that, paranormal or not, we live in an absolutely magical and fascinating universe with so much left to be discovered. So I hope it empowers people to kind of dig into the science side and get interested in that too.
I love that. And where can everybody find your book? Where's the best place for you?
Oh, for me, well, it's available pretty much anywhere books are sold. So you can find it at Indigo. You can find it on Amazon. I definitely want to shout out my publisher, Tidewater Press, because they are an independent Canadian publisher. They're absolutely wonderful. So you can buy it directly from them. And then if you're in the US, you can buy it at Barnes & Noble. If you're in the UK, you can buy it pretty much anywhere books are sold. So it is widely available. And of course, I always love when people get it from the library. That makes my heart happy too.
Oh, I love the library. I'm at the library all the time.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to share? Anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I feel like you really gave the book a close reading, so I want to thank you for that. That really, it means a lot to me when people clearly read it and read it deeply like that. And I just, I want to say thanks for all your work asking these questions and unearthing these stories. Like, especially here in Canada, we have so much interesting history, both paranormal and not, and it doesn't always get the shine that it deserves. And there's just so much to dig into here. So,
there's so much.
Yeah, that's what I encourage people, look at our history. It is fascinating.
Absolutely. It really is. There's like so much Canadiana, and I feel like, you know, with the States right next door, a lot of like our stuff just gets like shoved aside.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? We have good stuff going on here too.
100%.
And spooky stuff.
Yes.
Whatever you're into.
Both.
Whatever you're into, we have it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Anne, for being on Canadian Creepies. I truly love the book. And yeah, I hope some of my listeners pick it up and support you. And we can follow you on Instagram, right? Ann McDougall?
On Instagram, it's Anne Loves Museums, which I do.
Ann Loves Museum.
And
yes,
that would
do.
be awesome. And thank you so much for having me. This has been such a pleasure.
Hey, thank you. Honestly, this has been lovely.
Awesome.
I hope you have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.